All right. Okay. So on this week's episode of OBF Unplugged, I'm joined by Adam Kavanagh. So Adam is called the Turtle Man, and we're going to delve into that in a moment. And he has a unique way of living and quite a fascinating human. So welcome to the show, Adam. Sorry.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, mate. Yeah, thank you.
Like, where does that nickname, the Turtle Man, come from?
So a couple of years ago, I I had a couple of photos catching some freshwater turtles, and then yeah, just a couple of people just said to me like, "Oh, Turtle Man," and then I was like, "Oh no," and then it's just stuck since then. I mean, I haven't been getting called that so much, but there is people that's all they'll call me. They call me the Turtle Man. I'm like, oh no, but it doesn't seem to be sticking as much lately as it was before. But yeah, it's definitely one of my old nicknames.
That's the evolution of your nicknames. Okay, so Adam, who is Adam Kavanagh? Could you just explain to the listeners and give us a little bit of context to the conversation?
Yeah, I guess uh, Adam Kavanagh at this present moment. I am, yeah, I'm a guy from, oh, you'd say outback Queensland in Australia. And for the last, I'd be 4 years now, I've been living in my car, traveling Australia full time. And in that time, slowly stripping things back, giving things away, and getting back to a more simple, primitive caveman way of life, if you want to call it that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's me in a nutshell.
yeah, and was there a catalyst for the decision to make that? Like, was there a period of your life where you decided, okay, I'm just going to strip things back, I'm going to simplify, I'm going to declutter, and I'm going to go around this way of life where I'm just going to be at the mercy of the universe? Or was that something that you decided to do overnight, or was there a catalyst for that change?
Yeah, no, there definitely was. I spent 9 years in the coal mines here as a machine operator, just driving trucks and dozers and graders and all the big heavy machinery. And near the last few years that I spent in the mines, my health actually started to decline a fair bit. I had an overactive thyroid condition, and um, funnily enough, I actually never used to read books or anything like that. Like literally, just yeah, I don't want to say it, but yeah, I guess I used to be a bit of a dummy. And yeah, I went to the doctors here, and I guess at the time there wasn't much information about my illness, and basically I had like an alternative: either take medication for the rest of my life or have my thyroid removed and take medication for the rest of my life. And this is, I think I was about 25 or 26, and I kind of said, I was like, but like no one actually knew why I was sick. So anyway, I started to delve into it deeper, and actually, yeah, like I started reading books and researching this stuff. Like at the time, to be honest, I don't really know why I started doing that, but I could just tell. I was like, I had a few people in my family with the same illness, and there was no real reason behind it. Like it was just, oh, it is what it is, accept it, and this is how we fix it. So yeah, I started to research it, and in a book I was reading, it's got a massive title like "Why Do I Still Have Thyroid Symptoms When My Lab results say I'm normal" or something. It was a crazy title book, but there was one word in that book, and it said caveman diet, and I thought, right, okay, because at the time I would have tried anything, to fix myself at the time, and I was just lucky that was the first thing I stumbled across. So it made sense at the time, like, yeah, remove gluten, dairy, manage stress. There was a few other things, but mainly it was the diet aspect. So yeah, I really started to get into the caveman diet or paleo, and no, like I had some massive health increase, like pretty much straight away, and then over the years, and even now, like I'm still getting better and better constantly. But yeah, that kind of really sparked a massive change in me. And yeah, over the years, I guess I started to strip more things back. I was like, oh, okay, I'm going to kick my shoes off and try that, because it didn't just stop at the caveman diet. Like, the more my health increased, I was like, wow, okay, like, I've never ever heard of this before, and there's all these other ways to heal myself that I'd never heard of before, which all seems to be getting back to a more simple, nature based way of living, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. And yeah, I guess it kind of fit in with what I like to do, and I just kept diving into it more and more. And yeah, over the last few years, I've just slowly been stripping it back and getting back to a more simple way of living, and then yeah, wound up here. But I guess what I should add was, near before I quit the mines, I started to realize, I'm like, oh, okay, like, I realized shift work in a lot of the research I was doing wasn't probably the best thing for me. And then it got to that stage where I was like, right, I think I'm gonna, like, literally, I don't know where the spark for it came, but I was like, I'm gonna quit my job and just see what happens. Like, there was no plan. I was like, I'm gonna quit my job and just go traveling. And thankfully, I'm still traveling. I haven't stopped yet. It's been like 4 years. Yeah.
That's an amazing story, isn't it? And just on the shift work, like, the research is quite conclusive on the shift work in terms of how detrimental it is for your health and your long-term well-being. Was that something that you saw among your work colleagues, even within the coal mines?
Oh yeah, like heart disease was really common, diabetes is really common. So many illnesses were really common. And I mean, at the time when I was in it, I didn't think nothing of it. Like, I just thought it was normal. It's like, oh, okay, you get diabetes, that's just normal, or heart disease. It's just like drawing straws, is how I used to think about it. It's like, oh, it was just a lucky dip whether you had it or not. But the more I've dived into it, it's like, no, there's definitely steps you can take to reduce your risk,
Yeah.
and lifestyle's a massive factor. So, well, there's a reason they call it the graveyard shift.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, that is true. So in terms of the first steps you took, did you go, when we talk about your diet, did you, like, overnight just completely switch from your traditional diet or whatever it was at the time? I presume it was like the standard Australian or the standard American diet, to this caveman diet, or did you eliminate, right, I'm going to go gluten first, I'm going to go dairy first, or did you go cold turkey and just decide to make the overnight change?
I think, yeah, I think I did go. It was literally, it changed as I was reading the book. So it said to remove gluten, and then, like, maybe I did that for a few days until I hit the caveman part, and I'm like, oh, okay, I'm going to try this way instead. So it literally was overnight,
Okay.
because I had a few massive health scares at the time. Like thankfully it wasn't that, but they were so. Uh, they really didn't know why I had thyroid, so I was getting tested for, like, cancer and brain tumors and stuff. So at the time, I was pretty motivated to do anything for my health. So I just overnight just completely changed my diet, got in the cupboard, threw everything out, and yeah, that's been me for the last 5, 6 years or something now.
Okay, and I think, like, I know a lot of people who have done a caveman diet, and I've obviously played around with paleo and so forth myself, but I never went to the point where I upped and started to decide to hunt my own food and make my own tools to hunt my own food. So was that something that you always done, or was that something that you had been rare doing, or was it an interest of yours, or is that something that came with the territory with this big shift?
Yeah, it was a few things. When I was a kid, I grew up on a cattle property, so it wasn't uncommon for us to go out, like, shooting rabbits, or stuff like that. So I had been raised with that, and my dad, when we were kids, he was always taking us fishing, or um, stuff like that. So I kind of grew up doing a little bit of that stuff, not a lot, but I did a little bit of it. And then I guess as I got a bit older, my brothers and I got into archery, and then yeah, it kind of all went from there. Like, there was this passion I had for going out in the bush and starting to hunt, and then it just made sense once I uh, went paleo. or started, basically doing at the time I was just calling it paleo. Like I just thought, oh well, okay. I was going out fishing a bit and eating that, so I was like, well, it just makes sense if I'm going to start doing this caveman diet to start hunting for my food as well. And it really has been an evolution. Like it wasn't, and even now, like I'm in town, stuck in town at the moment, so I'm not hunting so much at the minute. But whenever I have the chance, it's mostly hunting. Like there's not much bought food, especially when I'm up on indigenous land. Yeah, so it's definitely been an evolution over the last few years to more of that way of eating.
Okay, and like I'm intrigued by this. So in terms of, there would be long periods of fasting, so within how you live your life. So would you hunt and freeze? Would you hunt and literally eat straight away? Like what way do you work that? Do you store for periods of days where you're not going to go hunting, or what way do you work that?
Yeah, especially for the type of traveling I do, and especially just for wastage as well. I have like a fridge in my car. Um, just like a battery powered fridge. It's not massive, so I'll uh, I'll definitely store food in there. But at the same time, it's nothing for me to go 5 days fasting because I haven't been able to hunt food. So once I have hunted food, I'm eating. That's the first thing I'll do. Like I'll eat, and then like then process the rest and put it in the fridge and store it, and then I'll try to live off that until I get something else. So like I'm always in this position where I'll get a bit of food in the fridge, but then I'm spending that, and there's a bit of relief. It's like, oh, okay, I can have a few days rest now, but then it'll be back to, okay, like the hunting is pretty hard where I go, and I guess I'm kind of fussy with what I try to take as well. Like I don't try to take the large animals so much because there's only so much room I have in my fridge unless I'm sharing it with the indigenous people, or vice versa. Usually, like they'll go kill a large animal and then I'll go out and help them process it, and then they'll just give me some. But yeah, like there's always this process of me thinking a few days ahead, trying to always have a little bit of food either stored in my fridge because or otherwise then I'm fasting. So it's nothing for me to spend a fair bit of time without food actually as well.
Cool. So just to sum up so far, so you're living in your car, you have your hunting
Yeah,
equipment in your car, and
yeah,
you you make a kill, you process it there and then on the land, you bring back the food you
yeah,
want, you I presume then the process of cooking the food happens on the land, okay?
yeah,
And you store what you don't eat, and then you just go and travel again. Or would you
exactly.
camp
Yeah.
in that area?
Or yeah, well, it depends what I'm doing. If I'm on the road, kind of moving, um, it'll definitely change what I'll be eating. Um, I mean, I probably shouldn't really say it, but I'll I'll eat roadkill. So like if I'm on the road traveling along, like I will eat the roadkill. But normally when I am up on indigenous land, like there's a certain area that I go, and I'll kind of be in one area, or it'll depend if I want to eat fish, I'll travel out to the coastal area and go fishing or eat more seafood. Or if I'm spending more time inland, then it's more like wild pigs or wild cattle. And yeah, and then other than that, if I'm on the road full time, yeah, it would just be like buying store bought stuff or otherwise roadkill.
Okay, okay. And what has been, when you make a kill, right? And what's your biggest learning with the indigenous people as well? Like what cuts or parts of the kill do they value most, and do you value most?
Yeah, well, it's kind of funny. We we both value the organ meats very highly. So and even then, I've learned a lot more about different organ meats being with them as well. There's one. It has a weird name. I forget exactly what it is. Like I've heard it called like sweet bread or milk gut, or maybe that's two different ones. Anyway, that seems to be the most prized bit of organ meat. and yeah, like that's literally the first thing. And there usually seems to be uh, sometimes there's a bit of argument over who gets what organ meats, but that definitely seems to be the most prized stuff. And then it's funny, usually that I'll usually miss out on the organ meats if I'm processing an animal with them. Or sometimes I might get a bit of liver or something like that. But it's kind of funny. Usually the meats they give me are the ones that are most, where we would consider the most prized cuts of meat, like like the eye fillet or the rib fillet or stuff like that. Like they're quite happy to give that to me. But yeah, like they will mainly, from my time with the indigenous people that I've spent time with, yeah, the organ meats are the most prized, and that is for me as well. But I'm just thankful to be there in the process. I'm not going to fight with them over organ meats.
And like the ironic thing about that is, if you go to any butchers in the Western world, the organ meats are, number one, they're probably not sold, and number two, they're definitely the cheapest cuts that are on display in the butcher's stall.
Yeah, even in Australia, like yeah, it's nothing. Usually, it's not on display. You can always ask for it. It's always very cheap, very cheap. Yeah, it's not not seen as food usually when you ask them, even in Australia, they'll be like, oh, is this for your pets? And you're like, no, it's for me.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And the ironic thing is, like, or go back 2 generations ago, and liver and heart and tongue and all these cuts that we don't commonly eat now. Where I won't say we don't, because I do and you do, but many people don't. And certainly the next generation, I think it'll probably be wiped. Because I'm lucky enough that, number one, the butchers in my local town, they still have an abattoir, so they still kill their own animals, they rear their own animals, so at least you know where that process comes from, right? But in a lot of butchers and traditional supermarkets, you won't get that at all. They won't. You might get a small bit of liver from time to time, but that's about the bones of it. No pun intended. That's about the end point when it comes to organ meats. And I can remember my grandfather in particular. Like, my grandfather would have organ meat consistently, and within that generation, it was a big thing. And of course, back then they knew the value from the nutritional standpoint of those cuts. And this is the greater point here, that we have lost these traditions that are still being kept alive in the communities and the environments that you live your life in. But in the Western world and in more built up areas, we've lost that.
yeah, to be honest, I do feel to some degree like I think that is being lost up there as well.
Is
Like
it?
I
Okay.
do feel, yeah, I do feel that actually. Yeah, I think it is slowly being lost.
Okay.
Because um, the way of thinking is like it is a lot easier to go to the store and buy food than to go hunt it. So yeah, the to go up there and actually still be able to go hunt is like I guess yeah, it does seem to be a little bit rare. So I'm pretty fortunate for that.
Okay.
But yeah,
Okay.
I could be wrong, but I do feel there is. Yeah, I do feel it is something I think that could be lost.
Yeah. And the psychology around making a kill and having ample food, it must be, if you fasted for 5 days and you're hungry and you make a kill, it must be an unbelievable feeling of, number one, relief, and number two, satisfaction through that. Could we kind of delve into that a small bit? How does that feel? What's the psychology around that?
Yeah, to be honest, I guess my feelings towards hunting have definitely changed over the years. Um, I guess initially when I started, like I maybe I didn't give it so much thought, but now definitely there is a lot of like I'm quite aware of like the for me like everything has energy, so like I feel more aware of that, and there's definitely more of a like a massive respect for the animals that I'm hunting. So it's kind of hard to explain. It's not like this massive amount of joy for hunting or killing something, but it's like this. It's more gratitude and definitely relief. Like a few of the times I have gone for a few days without food. When you finally get something, it's just like this massive weight gets lifted. And it's just relief. Like I'll just sit there and just like you do. You just sit in it for a bit, like just this massive feeling of like I've got food. Like I can relax now for a bit because I don't know. Like for me personally, I feel like I changed. My mindset really completely changes when you're really hungry and you walk around with a bow. Yeah, I guess maybe it's kind of weird way to put it, but like you do become more animalistic or
Yeah,
primal or something. It
yeah.
definitely seems to happen
Well,
when I put myself in that situation.
yeah, but like you kind of nailed it there because when you're really hungry and you're walking around with a bow, now that's really hungry. When you're hunting your own food as opposed to being able to pull in at the next shop or pull into the next supermarket and buy something, there's a completely different psychological situation going on there because, when you're hungry, there's an element of, I won't even call it anxiety, but people get narky, people are hungry, their energy levels are low, they're sleepy, they're moody, but yet you have to stay really tuned in and cognitively aware because it's you against the environment. So there's a completely different um I suppose psychological attachment and component and awareness around those situations. And has there ever been a point where the hunter has become the hunted? Has there ever been a day or a moment or some stories on the adventure where you've become a small bit you on the receiving end of your own of your own activities?
Yeah, no, there definitely has. The wild scrub bulls or scrub cattle in Australia are pretty notorious for being very, very, very dangerous. They definitely have killed people. And yeah, I've been in a situation where like they've actively been trying to get me. Like yeah, I have got footage of one behind a tree trying to get me. But I mean, thankfully, I haven't. Yeah, I haven't. You know, completely grabbed the bull by the horns there. But I was hunting a wild boar, and I have been chased by a few pigs in my time. But yeah, there was one time that a rather large boar did attack me. I've got a few like scars in my hand. Its tusk went through my hand. So yeah, actually, I got pretty messed up pretty badly that time. Yeah,
Okay.
so that wasn't real good.
Yeah, it would be an unbelievably a compelling experience and a confronting experience, I'd imagine, to be on the other side of the equation, so to speak. And in terms of how you navigate around Australia, is there a plan? Is there? I'm not going to say there's a roadmap, right? Because not even in literal terms, but would you literally camp in a certain area, hunt for a while, and just say, right, I'm going south, north, east, west? Like you just use your own intuition. You let yourself at the mercy of the universe. How do you navigate?
Yeah, I guess you could say I've literally been going with the wind or following my intuition for the last couple of years. And yeah, it really like it's led me to some pretty awesome experiences. And for whatever reason, usually, yeah, I guess that's why I've spent more time in the remote north of Australia. Like it just seems I seem to get called up there more often than not. And well, actually, that's yeah. Even at the moment, that's the next destination for me because there's a certain part of Australia called Arnhem Land. It's like yeah, like a well-known Indigenous sort of area in Australia, and that's actually the only place in Australia I haven't been. So the Indigenous people up there have actually adopted me. So yeah, I'm gonna. That's my next destination. Yeah, is
And
to
have
head
you
back
all
up there as soon as.
and have you always been well received and welcomed into communities?
Um, I guess I have been. I mean, I know that's definitely not the case. It's definitely not the case. Like they'll yeah, I've just, I guess, been fortunate or lucky just how I've sort of wound up in that situation. Like I hadn't actually planned it. It sort of happened by, I guess, coincidence how I wound up there. But yeah, it's just, I've just been rather fortunate to, I guess, really respect their time. And yeah, it's kind of, and it's led to some really awesome experiences.
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine so. And like, what has been your biggest learning that you think that if you were to go back to your old life, which is working a 9 to 5 or working what we'll call the traditional, even though it's not the traditional, because the traditional is your way of doing things, but we'll say the modern, yeah, we'll say the modern lifestyle. If there was one big learning that you could take from your current lifestyle to bring back into a modern way of living, what would it be like?
Uh, I guess really just for me, just stripping things back. Like I, I don't think things have to be so stimulating or complicated as as we're sort of currently living. Like it's kind of funny for me personally. The more I strip things back, the happier I seem to be. If that makes sense,
Yeah,
like not wearing shoes, you know, being uncomfortable in the elements actually it seems to make me more happy. Like I guess we're living in a world where the aim is to try to make our lives as comfortable as possible. So you never have to feel hot or cold or uncomfortable. But when you actually put yourself in that situation, you you actually, for me personally, I think that's you can sort of find happiness in the uncomfortable, which
yeah.
is something we definitely have gone away from, which has been a massive learning for me.
Yeah, it again, like I find it just ironic, and I know I've referenced it already, but again, like I remember I called to my grandfather. My grandfather was a blacksmith in the town where I'm from, so he would have shoed horses and he would have worked under candlelight and had a very physical job. But there was one blacksmith in the town, and that was his role. Okay, and I remember even when he was in his 80s, I'd go fencing with him, and he had he had his own forge, but he had a kind of a contraction made up even in his 80s where he could pin barbed wire and pull it, and it would allow him pull it with one hand, and he'd use the sledge with his other hand. And I remember I was about 14 or 15, and I was just always amazed at how strong he was. But after our work, I'd call up to him that night, and we'd just sit down in the sitting room. There'd be no television, and there was just a fire, and we'd spend hours just looking into the fire, and there was no conversation. There didn't have to be conversation, and we were comfortable enough in the fact that there wasn't a conversation. And we have a society now where we have apps and we have 6 week mindfulness courses and we have meditation courses, but that was the most primitive and natural form of meditation, because there's something about fire that's deeply ingrained. And when we think of like fire changed humanity, it changed the course of how we live our lives now. We could cook food, we could keep from being hunted, and we could also hunt by the use of fire. So I'd imagine with all that time that you have in solitude and on your own, there must be a really deep peace and meditation and stillness in that, is there?
Yeah, I mean, like that's a perfect way to put it. Like that's definitely another big takeaway from my time, especially being solo and spending a lot of time by myself, is that it it is like, yeah, like I guess in the modern world we do, there's like, yeah, meditation apps and there's all these breathing techniques and all this stuff, which I actually use. Like I highly, yeah, like I recommend that stuff. I love it. But when you're out in nature, it's just like a living meditation. Meditation is not a thing. You just you are meditating. Like you're just, you're listening to nature. Like you're being so super focused on the temperature, the weather, the animals, like everything that's going on. It is a meditation. And yeah, like it's funny you mention that. And I guess to try to bring something into it, like people go do ayahuasca in South America and stuff like that. But I think spending time in solitude in nature can kind of trigger the same experience I guess people are looking for in doing that. Like that's what I personally have felt, and like I believe has happened to me is probably maybe something very similar to that.
Mm.
So I guess maybe that's why cultures had like the walkabout. Like, yeah.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. And another thing that I kind of, when I knew we were going to have this conversation today, have you ever brought someone from the what we'll call people who've been conditioned to the modern lifestyle into the bush for a number of days, and how have you noticed their reaction to it? Because like you have been X amount of years now living this lifestyle, right? So I won't say you become desensitized to it, but you adapt to it and you become used to it. It's like the gym environment. You know, for me to walk into a gym, it's just another day. Whereas I'm well aware that if someone has never been in a gym before, that they're deconditioned to that, and that I'm deconditioned to that, and it's completely new to them, and I have to be aware of that. So have you brought people into your environment, and how do they is it awe? Do they get anxious? Are they scared? What's the emotional arousals around that kind of stuff?
Yeah, actually, yeah, that's awesome you mentioned that. Actually, I I did take a fella out with me once. It was only for like a day or two. It was pretty remote, but we went out for a bit of a walk at night time, and I never really thought about it. Like I've been out in the middle of nowhere, walking around at like 10 p.m. at night time, running into scrubbles and stuff. Like it's not ideal, but yeah, like I took this guy out with me and we're walking around at night, and I guess I am deconditioned to it now, or conditioned to it, however you want to say it. Like I don't really think anything of it now. Like it's just normal for me. But he was very concerned. Like he was actually very like a little bit panicked, and I guess yeah, I didn't realize that would have been a thing for him, um, because I do it so much. But yeah, like there was like he was very concerned, and he was someone that I would have said uh, I thought would have handled that situation very well. But yeah, was not the case. So
Yeah, yeah, I can imagine so, because there's, in our everyday lives, there's like we have so much control with what we do living in my kind of environment and lifestyle. Whereas if you're at the absolute mercy of nature, it's a different world. And especially if you're not accustomed to being there, and you can imagine that there would be a state of anxiety attached to that, and have you ever looked into perhaps, like, it's something that I would love to experience. I would just love. I have a good friend, Ian Molan, and I'll give him a shout out here. He's a solid guy, and I know that he spent a lot of time out in the bush, and he worked on big farms where he'd round up cattle and so forth. And he had stories that I always found fascinating, and I find your story fascinating, and certainly something that I would love to do at some period of my life. But is it something that you would think about doing in terms of, I won't even call it a business, but I would call it as probably maybe a path?
yeah, definitely. I think that's where I'm currently at, is eventually taking people out with me and offering them this same kind of experience that I've had. It is actually, I guess you could say, I am in the process of developing it now. I guess the only thing holding me back at the moment is, I guess, the current
Climate.
climate and situation. And I've had a few other amazing opportunities of similar direction thrown my way. So I guess I'm focusing on them for the minute, but I am definitely planning on offering this as something I can share with people at some stage soon, hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah, and is there actually many people doing it? I'd imagine that I don't think there was a whole pile of people and offering a service like that. Like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess there is to a degree. Like I'm sure, like I feel that yeah, like to some degree, I'm sure there is something like that. Maybe not to the extent of what I would like to share with people out there. I'm sure it's probably not, wouldn't be as comfortable as what other people would offer. um, but yeah, like I do feel it is something out there, but yeah, I haven't really seen it in the way that I would do it. No, not yet.
Cool, cool. Um, and just in terms of living out of your car, right? And I meant to ask you this at the start. Do you actually sleep in your car, or do you set up camps?
I guess I do it a few different ways. I started out initially sleeping in a swag. I mean, I don't know if that's if you have the word or term swag over there, but yeah, there's like a small roll up bed is
Okay.
what I started on, and then I guess I got rather flash at the moment, and I have been swapping between a swag and a rooftop tent or a tent, and I have slept in the dirt on the ground as well. So um, I guess a mixture of all three is how I'll be. If I actually happen to sleep in the car, it's usually if there's like really really bad weather and you wouldn't want to have a storm set up. I mean, you wouldn't want to have a tent set up in a storm. Is usually when I'd sleep in my car, but yeah,
Okay. And
it's pretty rough whichever way.
yeah, yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'd imagine it actually gets quite cold at night as well, like, wouldn't it?
Uh, Definitely in like maybe more the south of Australia, like the north, the northern parts of Australia don't tend to get too cold, to be honest. Yeah, it's not usually so cold. If anything, it's usually trying to escape the heat. Even in the middle of the night, you'll still be sweating because it's so hot.
Yeah, yeah. I remember the one time I was in Cairns, I just nearly killed me the heat. I wasn't accustomed to it at all.
Yeah.
And could you do you think that you could take your lifestyle to other countries? Do you think that would you ever be interested in getting outside of Australia and living the very same lifestyle? I know you've done some traveling through South Africa during your days anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, that was one awesome thing was to travel Australia and kind of to some degree it was a tour, but it was a very bare bones, camping kind of trip, um, which was awesome. So yeah, I would love to, and it's definitely something that I am pursuing is to take this overseas and experience my way of living and learn from other cultures around the world. So yeah, I'm hoping that that is definitely a possibility in the future for me as well. Not just learning from Australia, but from the world. Yeah, like definitely, I'd love to experience this around the world. Actually, yeah.
Yeah, and the ironic thing is, Adam, I think that there is possibly, and I don't want to be presumptuous here, but there is a large majority of the human population who would give their two arms to be in your position and to live the lifestyle you live. I just think of people who are locked into financial commitments and mortgages and locked into jobs that they hate, and you know what I mean, essentially trapped by society. And the fact that you can wake up in the morning and you can say, right, I'm going this way, this way, this way, this way. I have food that I've hunted that's inside in the boot of my car. I have enough petrol or fuel to get me somewhere, and I can just enjoy the ride. Like, that's what most people do for 2 weeks of the year as part of their holiday, whereas you get to do it every day.
Yeah. Like I guess I've never actually told anyone this before, really. It's kind of funny, like especially with social media, we can portray lives that people would assume is really good. Like people see like the really flash car and the flash house and everything else that entails, and people, I guess, give the image that that's happiness. Like if you get that, then you're happy, or people that live that way are happy. But I guess if I'm brutally honest, I've had messages from very famous people that would would love to do what I'm doing, and honestly, that blows me away because like from the outside looking in, you would look at that and you think, oh, like they look really happy, but maybe that's not always the case, and that's been my own learning. Is uh, like I did have a high paying job in the mine, and to go back to I guess being a gypsy or whatever you want to call it now, like it definitely seems to I feel happier within myself living this way. And then yeah, like that to have messages from people that I guess yeah, like exactly like you said, like they would love to live the life I'm living, and that's the thing. It is actually is so easy to do, but yeah, like that blows me away when I have received messages like that from I guess well known or well known people that that they have the flash things, and you think they would be happy, but
Yeah.
maybe not.
It's all perception, isn't it? Like the most
Yeah.
tragic thing about humanity is we put off living. You know, when we're and it starts from when we're kids. When we're kids, we use this phrase that, oh, when I leave school, I'm going to do X, Y, or Z. And then when we're in school, we say, oh, when I go to college, I'll do it. And then when we're in college, we say, yeah, when I get married, I'll do it. And then when we're married, we'll say, ah, but when the kids are grown up, we'll do it. And we put off living all our lives to get to the point where you are, which is freedom. Like to me, if we look at freedom in its purest sense, like, and I don't want to be presumptuous, but I don't know if you have financial freedom. I don't know if you have spiritual freedom. But as far as I can see from the outset, when you don't have so many financial commitments, then and you don't have so many financial draws, then it goes a long way to creating financial freedom. And if food is free, and if you can hunt your own food, and if you have the resources and the skill set to cook your own food, and if you have those resources that allow you to set up tents and set up camps, and if you have the mindset that you're comfortable enough in yourself to go, number one, 3 to 4 days without food, because most people, the thoughts of that would just tear them apart. And secondly, to be so comfortable in your own skin as a human being, as a person. Most people now can't sit in silence. Most people now, they are stimulated to the point where they cannot go without breaking silence. And I can just visualize, and I can try to conceptualize what it must be like to lie underneath a blanket of stars and just be comfortable with your own thoughts. And that, to me, is the essence of life. So I think that I am unbelievably intrigued by what you do, but I'm also, you know, humbled to speak to you, because I just think what you do is a phenomenal sense of what humanity is about. I really, really do.
Well, if you ever happen to wind up in Australia, I'd be more than happy to take you out into the bush. Yeah.
And for, I should have said this at the start, for the people, get on social media, get on Instagram and follow Adam's Instagram, because it is like, we talk about influencers in this modern day world of social media. Adam's Instagram is definitely in my top 5 Instagrams. And I didn't even realize you had an Instagram, because I was following you on Facebook for quite a while, right? And I'd see pictures coming up on Facebook every now and then. And I thought, man, you took a picture underneath a waterfall there about 6 or 12 months ago, I think. And you were semi-naked. Number one, I thought, fuck, he is ripped. That was the first thing, right? And if there is any living proof that the caveman lifestyle from an aesthetic standpoint works, just have a look at that picture, because Adam is fucking ripped in that, right? That's the first thing. But secondly, it was such, like, who took that photo? Like, were you, obviously you weren't on your own in that situation, like.
Yeah, I just chucked my camera on a timer on a tripod and took it.
There you go.
Yeah.
Ingenuity. You wouldn't, that picture there, right? If you went to any city in the world and you met a professional photographer and you said, right, this is what I want, that shot would probably cost you thousands for the panoramic view, for setting up. Like, what you had there, people would pay millions. People would pay, think of this, right? People pay thousands for the appearance, for the body to be ripped like that, for the background, for the backdrop. Like, all these things, people would pay so much money, and this is what you do every day. You know what I mean? So to me, it's just mind blowing. But if you need to get on Adam's Instagram, because it is just phenomenal. It is really, really, really cool. It's in my top 5 Instagrams since I found it. I really think it's one of the coolest reflections of society and of a life well lived. I think it's phenomenal.
Thanks, mate. Yeah, to be honest, I only got on social media so my family knew I was alive when I was traveling around. So it's kind of just grown from there.
Well, that's as good a reason as any reason, to be honest, isn't it? Come here, Adam. We could talk all day, my man. Thank you so much for this conversation, and for connecting. Again, I've said it 3 or 4 times, and I've probably said this more to any guest I've ever had on. I absolutely love your work. I love how you live your life. I love your value system. I love how you have decluttered, you know what I mean, just simplified your life to the point where you have found this element of freedom that, to be truthful about it, most of society are looking for, but they're looking in the wrong places. And I think that your message is so powerful. I think your message is, it's something that our youth could really need to hear, and more people need to hear. And that's why, I wanted to get you on this podcast, because I wanted to get that out there. So I want to really thank you from the bottom of my heart for coming on.
Thank you so much for having me on, man. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
No, you're more than welcome. Cheers, Adam. Thanks, my man.
Thanks.